12:41 is the time right now in the WHIP studios. You're listening to the Temple Sports Hour until 1 o'clock here. And the season that never rests, the Philadelphia Eagles. Every day you can always talk about the Birds. It's really unbelievable how it never rests. And right now we're joined by Hall of Fame writer Ray Didinger. Ray, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Now, Ray, obviously the talk of the town right now is Deshaun Jackson and how this whole scenario has been pretty much an absolute circus. What do you make of this whole scenario?
Well, I think it's like a lot of stories in the 24/7 news cycle. It's sort of taken on a life of its own. You know, I think that what's really going on is that the Eagles a few weeks ago made it known through the league that if you're interested in Deshaun Jackson, we'll talk. And that sort of leaked out, and then within 48 hours it became the Eagles are actively shopping Deshaun Jackson. And then 48 hours later it came, well, then now they're getting ready to release Deshaun Jackson. And I mean, none of that made a whole lot of sense. I mean, you're talking about one of the most explosive players in the NFL in the prime of his career coming off a career year. I mean, people like that you don't release. Okay? So I think the story just kind of got to, every day I think everybody felt like they had to take it to the next step, and they had to take it to the next step, and then more people talked, and then it just became, an 8-alarm fire. I think the truth of it, and you're beginning to see a little bit of it now at the meetings, that there's some people are starting to back off it a little bit, is, the Eagles just told some people, hey, listen, if you're interested in Deshaun Jackson, we'll talk about it. And if somebody came to the Eagles and offered them a first-round draft choice, you might see a trade. But this idea that you're talking about a release or trade for a fifth-round draft choice, I never believed that. Because if you're the Eagles, who are you going to replace him with? I mean, you don't have that guy on the roster right now. And for all we've said about this being a great wide receiver draft, even if you draft him in the first round and he's a blue-chip guy, he's still a rookie. And there's no guarantee that he's going to step in and be productive or as productive as Deshaun Jackson in his first year. The likelihood is he would not. So could Deshaun be moved? Yeah, I think he could be moved, but it'll be for the right offer. And I don't think by any means, I would be shocked if the Eagles released him, because that would be a pretty dumb move, and the Eagles haven't been making any dumb moves lately.
So you don't believe like there's any extracurricular off-the-field issues that might have triggered this? You think it really was down to the dollars and cents?
Oh, no, I think there is. I think there's concern about the team chemistry issue, and Deshaun being a very high-maintenance, high-strung player. But he's a diva, but that does not make him unique among wide receivers. I mean, they tend to be that. I know that Howie and Chip are both very concerned about the chemistry of the team, which they felt was really good last year. And they look at Deshaun as a guy that on any given day could threaten that. And that's an issue. I think there's a little bit of a concern there. I think they do look at the money to some extent as a next year kind of proposition, because his contract kicks up to a couple more million next year, and at the end of this year the Eagles they're probably going to have to write up some new contracts for some of their other younger players, guys like Fletcher Cox and Michael Kendricks and maybe Nick Foles. I mean, they're going to be in a position where they're going to have to spend a lot of money next year. So yeah, is his salary an issue? It's always an issue, but I don't think that's it primarily. I think it's some concern about his attitude and the type of team that they're trying to build, the kind of chemistry they're trying to build. And Deshaun's a guy that can rock the boat from time to time. And maybe they're a little bit concerned that a couple of the guys that were close to him, that were able to control him when he would have these little episodes where he would lose his temper on the sideline or stuff. I mean, Mike Vick and Jason Avant were two of the guys that could kind of calm him down, and they were two guys that he respected and listened to, and they're gone now. So maybe internally the Eagles are thinking, if Deshaun is in one of his moods during the game, who's going to talk to him, and who's he going to listen to? Is that something else we're going to put on Nick Foles' shoulders? Is he going to Is he going to become Deshaun's babysitter now on top of everything else? I mean, these are all the factors that weigh into it. But you have to at some point you have to bottom line this and just look at it as a football equation. And you look at Deshaun Jackson, 83 catches, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns, and then you got to say, okay, how are we going to replace those? And who are we going to replace those with? That becomes a very, very tough proposition, because for everyone else, you think about Deshaun Jackson, there aren't a whole lot of players out there that can do the things that he can do.
And Chip Kelly today came out and said that he has a very healthy relationship with Deshaun Jackson. How much of that do you buy? Do you think they have a really solid relationship?
I think they have an okay relationship. I don't think there's any friction that I could tell. I don't think there's any antagonism. I mean, if you just look at the production that Jackson had last year, it was the best year of his career. So, I mean, he had the blow up with with an assistant coach in the Minnesota game that everybody saw. And okay, I mean that seemed to resolve itself fairly quickly. I mean, Deshaun had his moments with Andy Reid too. I mean, Andy sat him down, and then Andy sat him down during the game, has benched him, deactivated him. So he's not the easiest guy to handle for any coach. But I don't think there's based on what I could see in 1 year, that there was a real problem between Jackson and Kelly any more than there will be a problem between Deshaun and anybody else.
Hey Ray, this is John. How you doing?
Fine. How you doing?
Pretty good. A few hours ago, Evan Mathis was put on the trade block because of his $5 million salary that is due in 2014. Do you think the Eagles will restructure his contract?
Maybe. Apparently the story came out that Mathis, he wants more money or wants to redo his. Everybody wants more money. That's nothing new. I don't know that the Eagles are going to extend. I don't know they're going to give him a lot more money. He's a player's over 30 now. I think the contract that he signed is a pretty fair one for a player of his ability and his age. But he's looking at the picture where he's seen. He saw Jason Peters signed a new deal in this offseason, and he saw Jason Kelsey sign a new deal in this offseason. And so he's thinking, well, okay, if you're taking care of some of your veteran offensive linemen, maybe I'm in line for a little consideration too. I think he probably inquired, or not he necessarily, but his agent probably inquired to see if there's anything that could be done. Not unusual in and of itself. I think that the story that now all of a sudden as a result of that, he's on the trading block. I don't see that. Again, he's a very, very good player. He's become a very, very steady player, and they don't have anybody on the roster right now that I think if they were to trade Evan Mathis, that I could say, okay, this guy's ready to step in. I don't see that player there right now. One of the strengths that they had last year, and one of the things that really helped them last year, was their offensive line stayed together, stayed healthy, and played well all season. I don't think you want to tamper with that. Re-signing Peters and re-signing Kelsey was a move towards solidifying that line and keeping it and keeping the continuity in place. I don't think they want to jeopardize that by trading a guy like Evan Mathis. He has right now at this point in his career, he has more value to the Eagles than he would have for any other team, I would think.
Ray, it's RB Fogel. Thanks a lot for jumping on with us.
Happy to do it.
The Eagles were active early on in free agency, locking up the receivers, signing a few players like Jenkins and Carroll. Do you think they're done in free agency? They're going to focus on the draft, or do you think they need to sign one more piece on defense?
There's not a whole lot out there. You could sign another guy, but it wouldn't be in a difference-making kind of way. You'd be talking about maybe a special teams type of guy. You're not talking about a guy that's going to play big minutes. I wouldn't suspect. I think at this point, it's all geared towards the draft and deciding what you're going to do around the draft. And that's when I really kind of think that the Deshaun talk is going to cool off for a while now. That Howie and Chip didn't really respond much to it at the league meetings. They certainly didn't put it to rest, which they could have, which makes you think that there's some truth to the rumor that there were some talks about Deshaun. Howie certainly could have put it to rest and just said, we're not interested in trading him. But he didn't really say that. He just said he's on our roster now. And Chip said today, well, is he going to be on our roster? I can't tell the future. Either of those guys could have said, you guys, I don't know what you're talking about here. Deshaun Jackson's going to be on our team. And the thing would have gone away. Nobody has said that. So that kind of keeps it alive, but I think it's going to cool off for a while, and it'll start to heat up as you get closer to the draft when, listen, there is a possibility that if the Eagles are willing to listen to offers, you get closer to the draft, somebody calls and says, hey, we got to pick high in the second round. You interested? The Eagles could listen at that point, or they could listen to other possible deals. But as far as free agency goes, I don't think there's much out there right now. I think their focus from this point until the 1st of May is going to all be geared towards maximizing what's available in this year's draft. And there's a big draft, boy. There's a lot of good players. I mean, there's a record number of underclassmen coming out, and it's got a lot of depth in a lot of areas.
And speaking of the draft, Ray, I'm someone that's been saying all along that they need to take a defensive lineman to really help increase the pressure, and it would really be a step forward for their defense. And other people are arguing, saying that when they get that 22nd pick, it should be best available. What do you think? Do you think they should go defense, or do you think they should go with the best available pick?
Well, it doesn't. It could be both. I mean, it could be that when you get there, the best available player is a defensive player. That would be nice if it were. I still feel like they have work to do on defense. I think that they need to. To me, the one defensive piece that they could really use to improve it would be somebody that could improve the pass rush. I think they need another pass rusher. To me, they don't have a real game-changing edge rusher, a guy that can really disrupt the other team. I mean, they got pretty good play out of Trent Cole last year. Connor Barwin was a nice addition. But they don't have a truly disruptive kind of pass rusher off the edge in the way that, say, Dwight Freeney was, or Robert Mathis, or that kind of guy. And there are some of them in this draft, not a lot, and the ones that are there are probably going to go in the first round. If that's what you're thinking, if you're thinking along those lines, then you're probably going to have to use your first pick for that player, because there isn't great depth. There aren't a whole lot of those players. But a guy like Dee Ford from Auburn is a guy that I think will probably be around in the 20s. I think he would probably be there if the Eagles don't trade up. He could be there at 22. And if he were, then I think he would be, at least in my opinion, a real attractive player for the Eagles, because I think he could be that in this kind of defense. I think that could be he could be a guy that could come in here and give them some good pass rush. But other than that, the best athlete available thing is not a bad strategy. Teams have been talking about it for years, and the fans get tired of hearing it. But that it's really true. I mean, if you have a player that's got the highest grade on your board, you're never really going to hurt yourself by taking that player if you really think that he can come in and contribute and play. And this is a draft where in certain areas there are a lot of real high-rated players. I mean, wide receivers, you're going to be looking at really good wide receivers as late as the 3rd round this year. Really, really good ones. There are going to be wide receivers that are going to be in this draft available in the 3rd round that will probably have a grade as high as some wide receivers that went in the 1st round in other years. It's that good.
Hey, Ray, I just read that the NFL has determined that the first 2 games of the preseason this coming year, that the point after attempts will be moved to the 20-yard line. Do you think this would be a good idea for the league if they install this in the regular season?
I'm not a big proponent of changing the rule there. I think that the game is fine, pretty much the way it is. I don't know why they feel like they have to do this. Is the extra point kind of automatic? Yeah, it kind of is. But you're talking about kickers. Kickers last year in the NFL made 86.6% of their field goal attempts from everywhere on the field. So I don't know that asking a guy to kick a 40-yard PAT is going to be a whole lot different than kicking it from the current distance. It might miss a couple here and there, but I don't think it's going to change the game significantly. I just don't know. I think you've got a great game. The game is right now is really good. It's more popular than it's ever been. The TV ratings last year were higher than they've ever been. The Super Bowl last year was the most watched television event in history. Why mess with it? If it works, it works. I'm not for changing. The one thing that I would say, not that anyone's consulted with me on this, but if you really don't like the PAT the way it is now, then I think moving it back to the 20 seems silly to me. I would say let's just take it another direction. Let's take the ball, instead of putting it at the 2, put it at the 1. And make it a real choice for the coach as to whether he wants to go for the kick or from the 1-yard line. Do I take a shot and try and punch it in here and go for the 2? You move it up to the 1-yard line, now it becomes a real decision about maybe, now maybe we should go for 2. And I would, if you really, really want to change the PAT rule, and I'm not all that in favor of it, but if you really want to, I would sooner see you do it that way than just make it a 30-yard kick.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Get a little bit more of risk in play. Jump into the offense.
And it's now it becomes a real strategic thing. You move the ball back to the 20, then nobody's going to go for 2. And guys are going to make it all the time anyway. So I mean, I don't see what you're gaining there. If you really want to change the whole thing and make people pay attention on the PAT, okay, put the ball at the 1 yard line. And now I guarantee people are going to sit up and say, "Wow, I wonder what the coach is going to do now." I mean, that's what I would do. But I mean, that's only if somebody told me you had to change. Personally, myself, I'm fine with it the way it is.
Ray, we have one more question for you. We're doing a little segment on our show where we're doing a little March Madness thing where we're trying to come up with the best Philadelphia athlete or coach, and we have a field of 64, and we've narrowed it down to the Elite Eight. So I just want to fire off the 8 names we still have left and just see who you might have as our champion.
Okay.
We have Wilt Chamberlain, Allen Iverson, Mike Schmidt, Dr. J, Bernie Perrant, Richie Ashburn, excuse me, not Richie. Richie Ashburn just got knocked out. Bobby Clark, Bill Barber, and Chuck Bednarik.
Okay, there's the best athlete?
Mm-hmm.
Will.
That's who we're thinking is the favorite right now. That's who we're probably going with.
Yeah, I mean that's a very strong field you got there. And Schmidt's the greatest third baseman I've ever seen. And Bobby Clark is probably the greatest talent / leader I think I've ever seen. Bednarik's the greatest player that's ever worn an Eagles uniform. I mean, they're all. There's those guys that they're all statue worthy. But if you ask me if I had to pick one, I mean, I would pick Wilt Chamberlain. I mean, there's a man who, set records that'll never be touched, and a guy who truly changed the game. So that's out of a tough field. I would have to go with Wilt.
All right, well, thanks so much for joining. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we'll talk to you again real soon.
Well, I enjoyed it, fellas. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot,
See you,
Ray.
Ray.
All righty. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.